Hi, Misha here, and this is my Blackbox. If you came here from the main Mishaco channel, the arms brace update video for January 2023, here we go. If you're just on this channel, I did publish that video, and that went into more history and is 90% just factual stuff, only 10% me editorializing a bit, giving opinions and thoughts. This is me more unplugged. So, a few disclaimers. 1, I will probably contradict myself, or seemingly so, in this video. 2, I'm going to have opinions here that you do not agree with. I will probably even play devil's advocate a few times, which is honestly fun to do in a debate sense. And 3, you listen to the end. Because some things I want to say, and again, this is totally off the cuff. I don't script these. Why would I? That's not the point. But I do have a lot of thoughts, and they will shift, they will change. And of course, just like you, I don't have a crystal ball. But one nice thing about studying history is it does give us pretty good basis of comparison for all kinds of stuff in life, including American politics as it pertains to firearms and pretty much everything else. So, as I have coffee here today, we'll do this, and hopefully I'll be able to put these two videos up concurrently, depending on YouTube. I put quite a few brace shooting clips in the one on the main channel because it may be the last time I can do that on YouTube, at least for a while. So, figured might as well enjoy it while we can. So with that, my thoughts on the situation thus far. To begin, I think everyone's pushed it too far. Let me explain. The firearms community and the ATF/government. So as I said in the main channel video, the ATF approved it, very straightforward, 2012. I was even able to show a Generation 1 arm brace. Now look at the current gens, the tail hooks, the SBA 3s, the SBA 4s. They definitely resemble stocks. Let's just be straight. And let's just be straight talk here. Most people are not strapping them to their arms. They're mounting them against their body. And by I say most people, I'm including myself in this, because why wouldn't we? And as I outlined in that video, the ATF has said very clearly that how you use something doesn't change what it is. So it's been perfectly legal. Now, there were kind of the, if not dark times, the gray times between 2015 and early 2017 when it really wasn't sure if other things besides SB Tactical were clear, or if putting it against your shoulder, it was iffy. But after the beginning of 2017, it was pretty clear again. But, you know, once they started doing more and more folding, then collapsing braces, once they started making them out of metal like the tail hook, I had to wonder, are you pushing it a bit much? That said, I don't blame them. That's how things go. We see the same thing with pistol importation. I mean, the Swiss guns coming in with 20, even 24-inch barrels. That's the nature of business. One-upsmanship, finding new markets, doing new things, letter of the law. But if we're being completely honest, the arm brace was approved in the spirit of the law as an arm device, not a shoulder device. So there's that. On the other hand, the ATF did approve it, and on multiple occasions confirmed, rebolstered this approval. And what they've done with this most recent document, tome, novel, has pushed it too far in the other direction, which is actually good for us. It's actually really good for us. if they just sent out a couple of page documents saying arm braces are illegal or guns with arm braces are illegal. That sucks, but at least it's clear. What they've done is the opposite of clear. As I was joking with J-Ro just last night, reading the actual verbiage, it's not legalese. It looks like it was written by an AI. It makes no sense whatsoever, has nothing clear about it, nothing even, it doesn't make sense. I mean, I don't know how to explain it. Those of you who've read legal documents will understand what I'm saying. It's unclear. It's not that I'm saying, oh, I don't like what it's saying, which I don't, but I don't understand what it's saying, and neither does anyone else. I don't even think the ATF does. Talking to local agents, field agents, they don't know what the hell's going on either. It is absolutely unclear. It almost seems like it's a fifth column within the ATF that wrote it so pathetically poorly that it would get blown away with the first puff of a judge's breath and gavel. I don't know. Either way, it's been pushed too far in either direction, and this was inevitable. Arm braces have been around for a decade, but they've been kind of controversial on and off that whole time. So this is not anything new. And that leads me into my second topic. Don't worry. Yeah, don't worry. I've seen people say, oh, you're going to, after this goes in, you go to jail for 10 years. Fuck, you aren't going to go to jail for 10 years. That is not practical. That is just stupid. I'm sorry. Anyone who, they're either fear-mongering or they don't understand law. I'm not saying you couldn't get in trouble. I'm just saying that doesn't happen. I've had people that I know that literally made machine guns and homemade bombs. They got in trouble. It wasn't 10 years in jail. So just because that's the maximum violating the NFA prescribes, blah, 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 that's not what's going to happen. Unfortunately, bad things could happen, but I don't even think those are that likely. Sorry, adjusting things. Basically, don't worry. I, you, anyone else, bought these in good faith. Most of us even got a letter, a copy of the ATF letter with ours saying that they're legal. Now, should the ATF have approved the arm brace? I'm going to be honest. If the ATF wanted to uphold the NFA, and if they had foresight, honestly, no, they should not have. They should not have approved it. Because anyone with half a brain working could see where this was going, even back in 2012, 2013. And Alex Bosco has done interviews. He's pointed out that even when the first prototypes were made, range officers even said, hey, this could violate the NFA. This could, by attaching it to a pistol, make it into effectively a stock, or at least a support structure similar to a stock. So this was something that was envisioned even before the first ATF letter was received at the end of 2012. Nothing new there. But the ATF approved it that year. They reaffirmed their approval in 2014. Yeah, they reversed it in 2015. Then they reversed the reversal in 2017. So 3 times now it's been approved. And then 2020 was just all a mess with the honey badger. But they've approved it more times than they've disapproved it, if that makes sense. It's a whole thing. We'll talk about the ATF later, but there's a saying in the South, and probably elsewhere too, shutting the barn door after the cows have left or horses have left. Trying to ban arm braces now, literally 10 years after they came out, with literally millions of owners in America, it's too late. It's too late. Even if they decided that 10 years ago, whatever agent made that call made the wrong call, it's done. It is in common use, common practice, and any judge, any jury for that matter too, will see that. That's how the legal system works, and I will talk more about our legal system later in this video, but that's just the reality. and any lawyer will say so. On top of that, you would actually have to get a defense attorney, a prosecutor to take the case. I'm not even sure you would. I remember when, and I've said this story before, but it's worth repeating here, when New York changed their magazine capacity limit from 10 rounds to 7, prosecutors wouldn't take cases where police tried to bring in people for having 8-round mags or whatever. You get to the point when even they, because they don't want that big of a loss on their record, and they are humans, at least some of them, in theory, and a lot of them, they see when someone is willfully, like if you make a homemade machine gun in your garage, or a suppressor in your garage, a silencer, you know the law, you know what you're doing. But people who bought arm braces, even people who waited a couple of years to make sure, which I know a lot of people did, that they would be considered legal, they bought in true good faith that they were. And for a decade, that was the law of the land. And I want to remind you now, as we end January 2023, arm braces are still legal. They're still being sold. All of this is something that has yet to happen. Even if the ATF says it's going to happen, injunctions and whatnot, sustains, and all this can happen. So I wouldn't worry. I wouldn't be antagonistic about it. I wouldn't go out there waving an arm brace under an agent's or even a police officer's nose. At the same time, I wouldn't be selling or destroying anything just yet. However, the way things are written, there are some interesting loopholes that we might be able to actually take advantage of. Let's discuss. The way the current thing from the ATF is written, they tried to cast such a wide net that they're not actually going to catch any fish. There's too many holes in it. I talk about the points in the main video. I don't feel like reiterating them now, and every channel has already talked about it. So, whatever. But you know it doesn't make sense. Everyone knows that. One interesting thing, though, that was rumored they would do is if someone wanted to, they could file for an SBR Form 1 for their existing brace pistol, making it a registered short-barreled rifle. And the normally present $200 fee would be waived. I see opportunities here. There are some guns I own that I'm perfectly happy being braced. My HK SP5, my BNT APC9, most of my AR pistols, they look fine braces. There are other guns that I have never been content as a braced pistol. My Swiss SIGs come to mind, the 5.52, 5.53. AKs, the Mini Barrel. And the reason I haven't actually SBR'd them, or even for that matter SBR'd my Bren 2 yet, is because this was a possibility. I didn't want to pay a stamp tax last year only for this freebie to come this year. So I've got a lot of guns that I wouldn't mind saving $200 on. And you know what? As it's been said before, 10 to 40 million braces have been sold. We don't know how many because it's not a serialized thing. They're cheap to produce, at least the basic ones. Now, chances are someone who owns one brace probably owns 3, 4, even a dozen. So I don't think there are 40 million owners, but there are millions of owners. What if every owner filed for an SBR on every brace pistol? Can you imagine the ATF receiving literally millions of forms all within a couple of month period? It would take them years, decades to process all that paperwork. I would love to see their reaction. They would almost just have to give a blanket amnesty and just send out kind of a form letter SBR approval. Because I don't think they would have time or the manpower or the money. if they even tried, they'd have to pull every agent out of the field that they had to come back to the office and do it. Which, there's an interesting thing. This anti-gun thing that's being pushed politically could actually literally have the opposite effect of making the ATF underpowered and actually unable to do its real job. And the ATF does have a real job. At least it used to. Wouldn't it be funny if this literally backfired on them there? So I'd almost encourage everyone who has a brace, at least send in a couple of forms so we overwhelm them. I just think that would be hilarious. And I would sincerely love to see how they dealt with that. Because I don't think they understand the bear they've poked here. How popular these are. How in common use these are. So on top of this shit getting kicked out of court, laughed out of court even probably, there's a few guns that I wanted to SBR that I plan on taking advantage of this to SBR, even though I think it won't actually stick. That's my plan. Of course, there is one other alternative that this could end up with that I'll mention at the end of this video. But, yeah, I just, it is funny. It really is. Maybe darkly funny, but then again, I've always kind of liked dark comedies. Another thing that's been brought up is that the ATF has overstepped its bounds, has been politicized. And do you think this is new? If so, you haven't been paying attention to American history ever? In theory, yeah, a bureaucratic agency should be apolitical. These are non-elected officials. They are often lifers or long-term government employees. They should be, in theory. Life doesn't work on theory, unfortunately. The truth is, not just the ATF, but many government agencies, the DEA, the EPA, whatever, they've all been used for political gains and goals for a very long time. And you can see the political winds as they change in the ATF's opinion on the braces. Funnily enough, they were pretty chill with it in 2012, even though that was the Obama administration. But then Sandy Hook happened and a few other events. And so in 2015, they tried to change. But through legal battles and, again, changing political winds in 2017, they backed off. But then in 2018, you had the bump stock ban, which further empowered and emboldened agencies like the ATF. And then we see them acting in 2020. Keep in mind, this is still under the same administration as 2017. Although it must be said that the DOJ under Bill Barr stepped in October, but I don't know that that was so much a political thing in that sense to help us, as they didn't want this happening right before the election. So that was deflected until after the election to try to save votes. Now, would their opinion that they released in December of 2020 been different if the president had been reelected versus changing to a Democrat? If we're being honest, we don't know. But what I can say, going back to that bump stock ban, what's happened, and it is a truly disturbing trend. Congress is supposed to craft, vote on, and create laws. The executive is there to enact and interpret laws. The judiciary is there to review and determine legality and constitutionality of the laws. This is the system. And again, in theory, it's a very good system. It allows the maximum number of people to have input for democracy to work without being so many people that it would be slow. You know, if every citizen had a chance to vote on every new law, nothing would ever happen. What Congress has done in the age of 24/7 news and now the newer age of Twitter and Twatter and Tweeter and sound bites and everything on the internet, no one in Congress, Republican or Democrat, really wants to make a law because they'll come under political fire no matter what they do. I joked in the main channel video, the only time I can remember them doing something that was universally praised was when they fixed daylight savings time. Otherwise, no matter what a Republican or a Democrat does, some group is going to be unhappy. So what they've done, and of course it takes effort, it takes time, it is hard to craft a law. They've abrogated that responsibility increasingly to the bureaucracy. And this is not new. This has been a shifting thing over decades. They've empowered agencies, the EPA is a good example, to make more determinations, to do more things, to effectively write law. No, they'll say, no, they're not writing law, they're just interpreting law, which is what they're supposed to do. Not really. They've actually, in the ATF now, this is a good example of them effectively legislating. Why isn't Congress kicking up a fit, though? Think about it. The ATF is basically doing Congress's job. Why are they not complaining? Because it actually serves their political interest. That's the problem. They don't want to work. They want to shift this off to the bureaucracy. When something good happens, Congress will still take, and the presidency too, credit for it. When something bad happens, they can blame the bad old bureaucrats, because we don't like bureaucrats, do we? I don't. I bet you don't either. They're a great scapegoat. And oftentimes, lately, that's what the ATF and other agencies have been used as. An unpopular agency scapegoated for passing unpopular laws and rules. Look at all the things that people in Congress have complained about on TV. Where are they on this? Where are all these Republicans, every single one of them running on a pro-2A platform? Look at all the stuff they've kicked a fit about over the last year or two. Things that, frankly, don't affect most Americans, maybe 1%, or things that aren't even truly real. And you have the bump stock thing first that affected hundreds of thousands of people for real. And you have the arm brace thing that affects millions of people. Why aren't Republican politicians lining up to scream about this? They claim to be pro-2A. I would imagine a lot of them aren't complaining because they don't even know about it. The thing is, if you purport to support something, wouldn't you want to know about it? That would seem logical to me. On the Democrat side, it's hilarious. People like Dianne Feinstein, who is pretty much gone now, spent her whole life being an anti-gunner and doesn't know the first goddamn thing about guns. I don't get that. And in recent talks, you can hear Congress, many members, not understand the difference between a bump stock and an arm brace. Bump and brace. Those two words are confusing people. And the fact that they do go on the back of the gun. Good God. You guys are paid hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. You can't afford a fucking 5-minute Google search? Even if you can't, you have dozens, maybe even 100 staffers. Send an intern. Even if you don't want them, at least know what the fuck you're talking about, please. I might disagree with you, but at least you'll sound intelligent and informed. Because right now I disagree with you and you sound like a fucking moron. And I'm not going to let the executive off either. True, the ATF became more politicized under the second Obama administration because of Sandy Hook and other events. You can kind of understand that in the sense that there was a huge public outcry about firearms. People saying, We have to do something. Children are dying. I completely agree. Sandy Hook was tragic. Sickening, even. What do we do? I don't know, but someone's got to do something. What something? I don't know. Something. There's that pressure when there's a bad event that something has to be done. Not the right thing. Not an effective thing. Something. And that's what happened with the ATF and other things. Arm braces were low-hanging fruit, along with, say, 80% receivers and eventually bump stocks, and they came on the radar. And this trend happened under the Trump administration, too. Once Las Vegas happened, bump stocks became in the news, and the executive branch, nominally led by Trump, pushed the ATF to ban them. And to the ATF's credit, for once, they pushed back at first saying, we don't have the authority. We need a new law, or at least an executive order. But again, abrogating responsibility, the executive wasn't willing to make a new executive order, and Congress was not willing to pass a new law. So the solution, they effectively expanded the powers of bureaucratic agencies, giving the ATF authority to ban bump stocks, to reinterpret them, if you will. And this is where we're at today with arm braces. The ATF now has the effective authority to reinterpret anything it wants. And that's because the other branches, the other parts, did not do their job. Because they didn't want the political flack. The Trump administration didn't want to be seen to be passing an executive order that was seen as anti-gun. Politically, that would be bad. Congress didn't want to pass a new rule, a new law, for their own reasons. Yet at the same time, there was such a human outcry from the public that something had to be done, and bump stocks were the current low-hanging fruit. It was done. So they wanted something done, but they didn't want to get their hands dirty. So they essentially forced the ATF. Now, don't get me wrong. Some in the ATF were happy for this. Some people love power. More the merrier. Some in ATF would rather ban all guns. But I worked with the ATF as a dealer and FFL for years. I can tell you categorically, not everyone in the ATF holds that attitude. Believe me or not, I don't really care, but it's the truth. Some people in the ATF actually want to do their original job, what they were originally created for, which isn't bad. The original job was to keep bad guns out of the hands of bad people. And I know some people say, no, guns aren't bad. What I mean by bad guns, illegal guns under the law. Like it or not, which I know most of us don't, the NFA was at least a law passed correctly. It went through Congress in 1934, was signed into law by the president. That is a law, wasn't created by the ATF. It went through the proper channels. It has been reviewed and upheld by the courts. It's a law. One we may not like, but it went through the proper constitutional channels. The ATF is to make sure that unregistered machine guns aren't out there. And people who typically have those are up to no good. Most people aren't going to have an illegal machine gun. Part of it is they could just be like me, where they want to stick to the law. It's just their personality. Part of it is, if that doesn't work, consequences. They don't want to go to jail and be fined. Also, the ATF is there to make sure that dealers like me do all the proper paperwork, 4473s, that guns aren't being sold out of the back door. Either way, they're doing their job. Another thing I've seen brought up is, well, with the arm brace situation, the government's made millions of people criminals overnight before with Prohibition. True, but for one, there was a public hue and outcry to ban liquor after World War I, even during, but it's neither here nor there. Two, again, not only did it go through the proper channels, they went above and beyond and made a fucking constitutional amendment. which by its very nature required a supermajority support. This is not that. This is one government agency making something that put just as many people into the criminal category as Prohibition did, but without making if Congress thinks it has the muster to make a constitutional amendment banning arm braces, I wouldn't like it, but at least I would say it was done legally. This isn't. So there's a world of difference between Prohibition and this. Also, I should remind you that Prohibition absolutely did not work and was very quickly repealed. So, well, I mean, not very quickly, but you know what I mean. It didn't last. It bit the government in its ass and promoted crime. It didn't get rid of it. There's a huge difference there. What else? Kind of going back to the whole government agencies being used for political ends and changing with the current administration and Congress. Just ask Native Americans, Indians, and African Americans, blacks, how that's worked for them. I mean, it's pretty commonly known that the big reason that marijuana was made illegal was it was seen as a way to control, and I'm going to say, discriminate against minority communities, namely black communities. A lot of the earliest firearms rules and laws from the 19th century were to try to keep guns out of the hands of Native Americans. It's been used as a tactic for years. Again, I'm not saying this is how it should be. I'm just saying this is the reality we live in. One thing I've noticed about people is they look at the past with rose-tinted glasses. The 1950s or 70s, 80s. Guys, those eras had just as many political problems, even maybe sometimes more than we have today. We're not living in an unprecedented times of political turmoil. We're not. Look at all the shit that happened in the 60s. What's different is the internet and 24/7 news. That magnifies. It makes the current problems feel worse, and then we feel worse, then everyone feels more stressed. It has a snowball effect. The reality isn't so different, but the perception is. And then I get to the whole, we have to do something about guns thing, too. The problem with arm braces, they weren't picked because they're being actually used in crimes and have been demonstrably shown to make a gun more lethal, deadly, blah, blah, blah. They were picked because their legal status was always a little iffy, a little gray. They were low-hanging fruit. In the end, this day was fated to come, because the arm brace wasn't protected under law passed by Congress. It was protected by an ATF letter, meaning that another ATF letter could knock it out. It's time that this needs to be settled. Now, going back, like I said, in 2020, the can was kicked down the road until after the election. Then the ATF put out the, 44 or 4999, whatever that bullshit, the 16-page thing with all the points. Well, they opened it up to public opinion, and they had thousands upon thousands of responses within a few days. The vast majority not wanting arm braces banned. And part, if we're going to be honest, is because the left doesn't know what an arm brace is. They probably thought it was already banned when the bump stock was banned in 2018. No surprise. To my surprise, I will say that Barack Obama wasn't nearly as big of a gun grabber as I think everyone anticipated. But Joe Biden, we've known. Look, we know Joe Biden's position on guns. He's made it abundantly clear. I can at least respect that. I don't like it. I don't agree with it. But I can respect someone who says this is how they feel. And he has been consistent on that. What I do not respect are other politicians that run on a pro to a platform, but then actually don't follow through. If you run on something, support it, promote it. It drove me crazy in 2016 during the election cycle when the Hearing Safe Act was all the talk of the town, and everyone thought, well, if the Republicans get in, we're going to have suppressors taken off the NFA. I'm fine with that. I think that's a great thing. The reason they're on there is specious anyway. And didn't you know it? The Republicans won. They gained control of Congress. They gained the White House. And the Hearing Safe Act was never heard from again. Now, if it had gone to the floor, gone to a vote, and been defeated by the Democrats, okay, fair play. You gave it your best, and it didn't work. No, it was just dropped. It never even made it out of committee, anything like that. It wasn't pushed, even talked about by Republicans, by politicians, by pro-2A people, because it was, at the end of the day, just a political fucking tool. That's what I neither like nor respect. Say what you will about the Democrats, at least when they gained control in 2020, well, effectively 2021, they pushed their agenda. Sometimes not successfully, sometimes successfully, but they did. And to that extent, we see that with Biden. He got in, we knew he was going to be looking at gun stuff, probably low-hanging fruit, and in the spring of 2021, he announced that he was going to be pushing for new things. Now, a little bit surprisingly, he actually did not sign an executive order, but he really didn't need to, because by this point the ATF was supercharged. They had an expansion of their interpretive rights, and they were basically directed to go against 80% receivers, DIY receivers, and arm braces, which started to pop on to the political radar a little bit, and a few other bits and bobs. And of course, the 80% thing, that's made the news. And I have a lot of mixed feelings about that. This video is not about this, but I could see an argument for going against those, because you are circumventing the 4473 process, the background process, the law as passed by Congress. The arm brace, though, okay, I'm going to play devil's advocate here. On a ghost gun, as they like to call them, 80% guns. Let's say someone buys AR-15 lowers, blanks. And let's say they work for a criminal organization, a gang, whatever. Theoretically, in their apartment or garage, they could make these into working lowers, and you can buy an upper, and neither component requires any type of background check at that time. Where I knew the days are numbered is when the 80% lower makers started selling the DIY kits. It seemed like it was one thing when an 80% was just, here's a brick of steel or a sheet of steel. But when they started giving you instructions and even drill bits on how to use them, it was pretty clear. It didn't take a genius. Even a cracked out or methed out redneck could probably do it. So you could say that they would be making illicit guns and then handing them over to people doing crimes. And there's a reason that throughout the decades, when guns are recovered in crime scenes, they often had the serial numbers filed off, because they were purchased through the black market. They were already illegally obtained. Well, 80% lowers could be said to be a way around that, especially when you even have 80% pistol frames, whatever. There's an argument to be made there. There's not an argument to be made for arm braces. You're not circumventing any law, except you could argue the SBR law. Much like the suppressor or silencer law it's specious, it's outdated, it's backwards, it's Hollywood think, it's stupid, and at the end of the day, it's all just wrong, all kinds of wrong. The myth of suppressors is that they make guns silent, that people can go do killings in apartment buildings and no one will hear it. Hollywood and video games have a lot to do with this, and it dates back to the 1930s, as all this really does. And of course, anyone who knows the reality about the only gun you can truly silence to the point it doesn't sound much louder than a clap is a .22. 9 mils are still reasonably loud, although relatively hearing safe. 45, same thing. But if you go to rifle calibers, 308, 300 Win Mag, no, there's no way you're doing that. And more importantly, crime doesn't really seem to gravitate towards suppressors. They don't really seem to be a tool of that. Now, the reality is they make shooting much more pleasant and fun, especially for indoor ranges. They can help people with hearing. And there's a reason that in a lot of European nations, they're greatly encouraged. America is kind of weird in our attitude about that. We're also weird in our attitude about SBRs, or what we call SBRs. Now, I'm sure you know, but just to be clear, when the NFA was passed, 1934, 18 inches was the minimum length. Anything under that was considered a handgun, and by the law, handguns were not allowed to have shoulder stocks, butt stocks. This was in reaction to a lot of gangsters that actually got their career because of Prohibition, that wonderful law that didn't work at all, taking things like BARs and cutting them down. It also put more strictures on things like Thompsons, which were already select fire, so it's a whole other thing in and of itself. Now, in the 70s, the minimum length for a rifle was reduced to 16 inches, which is actually good because a lot of common guns have a 16-inch barrel, give or take, the AK, the Sturmgewehr, or what have you. And that's where we're at today. And it wasn't really well known for a while, luckily, because of all the arm brace stuff. It is the whole reason SBRs were even a thing in the 30s was a loophole in the law and kind of how it was done, because originally they wanted all handguns to be registered, $200 stamps tax, and to keep people from taking and buying a rifle unregistered at a store and cutting it down into a pistol. The whole SBR thing was made. Well, the pistol part of the NFA was dropped, but the SBR and SBS, for that matter, remained. So it's kind of the appendix of the NFA, really. There's not really been any evidence that having a stock, and for that matter an arm brace, on a gun with a barrel under 16 inches makes it any more lethal. If anything, it makes it slightly bigger and bulkier. It also makes it easier to shoot accurately, which is a generally safe thing to do. If you shoot, you want things to go where you want it to go. And gotta remember the difference between a 16-inch AR-15 and a 14.5-inch M4, what have you, is just a couple of, just nothing in the having a stock. This is also, of course, this is law, so it is what it is. But it's a law that makes no difference. It's not one of those laws that a lot of people think about, frankly. And I don't know, it's all kinds of silliness. Because of our attitude over the decades of when something bad happens, someone has to do something. Our government has thousands upon thousands upon thousands of pages of laws on the books. And because of that, a lot of them effectively don't get enforced or get enforced in a very nominal level. 922R is a great example of that. As much as the internet likes to think about it, the government doesn't. It's a subsection of a regulation of a thing, of a blah, 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 that effectively doesn't matter. It's buried in legalities, and there's no time for that. And the SBR thing isn't a whole lot better, and the arm breast thing is even most people didn't know it even existed up until a year or so ago, outside of the gun community, that is. It's, I think you see what I'm saying. If not, oh well. But it's all ridiculousness. It really is. And you see other countries, they don't care if there's a stock or not. If a gun has a barrel under a certain length, it's in one category. If it doesn't, it's in another. Hot take, and this is maybe where people will disagree, that's fine. I have no problem treating rifles different than pistols, and that's how our law is right now. Most rifles, with the exception of some ARs, you have to be 18 years old to buy, and handguns 21 years old. On top of that, there are more strict regulations about handguns, such as the multiple handgun purchase form. Why not just make anything over 16 inches a rifle, anything under 16 inches a handgun? Stock or no stock, arm brace or no arm brace, what the hell does it really matter? And for that matter, sound suppressors. Just make them an item just like a pistol. You go in, fill out a 4473, it has a serial number, it can be traced if it's ever used in a crime. Why not? This stuff, I don't feel like guns should just be walk into a store and walk out with a gun and nothing else said or done. Again, some people may disagree, that's fine, but I'm going to tell you this, most FFLs, most dealers, most people in the industry, manufacturers, have this attitude. Most of us are fine with background checks. And yes, even paperwork. Because, well, most things in life have background checks and paperwork. Marriage certificates, death certificates. You go to school, you get paperwork. Most of this stuff is tracked. I have enough respect for firearms that I realize that they're neutral. They're not bad, but they're not good. And they can be used to do bad things and make bad things easier. You don't want underage kids getting their hands on them because of safety. And you don't want people that are mentally unstable, needing help, getting their hands on them. And you don't want criminals. You don't want felons who've already gone to jail for rape, murder, theft, what have you, getting their hands on a gun, not legally. You want to make that bar of entry high enough that it can't be done. Now the next step is you're going to say, well, criminals going to get a gun via the black market already. Very possible. What's kind of handy is that's already a crime. If guns were just free for all, even if you know Joe Smith is a criminal and about to commit a crime with this gun, if that gun in his hands isn't illegal for him to have, you basically have to wait for him to make that crime. But if it's illegal for him to have a gun at all, and the gun that he has was purchased illegally, maybe with a filed off serial number, right then and there you have probable cause to search him or even arrest him and put him in jail, thus preventing him, hopefully, from committing a crime and thus keeping citizens like you and I from being victimized. So I'm not against the system as it really stands. One nice thing is when I was a kid, background checks, waiting periods were a longer thing, 7-10 days. Now I know in some states they still exist, like California, but most places now, the NICS system takes 5 minutes, or if you have a carry license, which you should, you just show that gets scanned and you can walk out without even a NICS check. I think that's yeah, there you go. So compared to when I was younger, not having to have a wait period seems like a dream. And that kind of leads me to the courts and another place that I'm sure some will not just disagree but even laugh at me. I have faith in the court system. Well, the nihilist point of view is that everything's broken, everything's terrible, everything is going to hell. To that I say, you haven't traveled much, have you? Look, America has problems. I've already talked about how I don't like how Congress and even the executive, the presidency, I should say, have abrogated their authority to unelected, essentially unaccountable bureaucrats. That's terrible. There's a lot of other problems. However, go to certain nations, developing nations, third world nations, if you will. By the way, once upon a time, third world was not considered a derogatory term. It was actually a point of pride that some nations used to show that they weren't aligned with either the West or the communist East. Either way. Go there, and you'll see what a true corrupt system is like. Basically, whatever the president says is law, and the judiciary is either in his pocket or easily bribed. Therefore, money talks. In our judiciary, if you try to look at it objectively, he's really upheld firearms rights, especially in the last couple of decades. In fact, the bump stock ban is teetering and could very likely fall soon, which would actually be great precedent for stopping this arm brace nonsense before it gets started. On top of that, you have famous cases like Heller that has supported the right to own a handgun. You have other cases like out in California where their various things keep getting struck down. Of course, like a weed, they keep making new things in their legislature, but the court keeps striking them down. Really look at firearms court cases and rulings. And a lot of those cases are much less certain, more dubious than this arm brace nonsense. You have people accused of violating actual laws passed by Congress, very clear, very succinct laws. This arm brace is neither that nor that. So I think if it does, and I've alluded throughout the whole video, if it does make it to the courts, it'll be just tossed out. I think a judge will clearly see this for what it is. And let's be honest, a lot of the judges are pretty pro 2A. Now, of course, certain areas, certain circuits, certain things, and courts do take time. I'm very confident if this gets passed, if it goes into effect, it'll get tossed out. I'm also very aware that even if it's fast-tracked, you're looking at a year or more. That's just bureaucracy at its work, and the court system. Again, we have thousands upon thousands of laws in this country, many that shouldn't exist, and even innocent people go to court, have to prove their day, yada, yada, yada. So you might disagree with me, but I actually feel like the courts would have our backs in this. Because if they don't, this sets a precedent that we don't want to think about. If the ATF gets away with this, it means they have limitless power. It means that they can declare anything, not just illegal going forward. They're not saying, okay, arm braces that were already bought before 2023 are fine, but no more going forward. They're saying braces bought a decade ago are no longer legal, or at least attached to guns, yada, yada. If they have that authority, they could rule that anything they've reclassified, any import, any handgun, any rifle, they just decide that they could just say, look, we reinterpreted it and no AR should have bayonet lugs, so go chop off all your bayonet lugs, even from that 1964 SP1 you've got. And that doesn't just go to the ATF, that goes to every other regulatory agency. They can just willy-nilly change their minds about anything, the car you drive, the house you live in, anything. That means there's no certainty, there's no, essentially, rule of law, there's no guarantor of anything. This country is founded on the principles of innocent till proven guilty, everyone knows that, but also on the expectation that, as long as you are obeying the law, they can't just say what you did years ago is automatically illegal now, and that they'll come after you for that. They could change their minds and say going forward, proactive versus retroactive. But as a general rule, retroactive laws are not allowed. And the courts have upheld this thousands of times. One case that I always kind of cite here is the so-called G-series FALs. Those were sold back around 61, 62. And they sold fewer than 2,000, and they were converted full auto guns that were made semi-auto. And they were sold here legally at the time. And then, after the fact, the predecessor to the ATF ruled them as unlawful machine guns because they had once been a machine gun. This is at the dawn of that once a machine gun, always a machine gun thing. Well, it went to court, and quite rapidly the judge ruled, I think it was around 1964, that since the people bought them in good faith, those guns are exempt, that they're perfectly legal. And not just for those individuals who bought them to own, but in general, because those guns were approved by the ATF originally, legally bought and sold with the expectation of legality, they were fine. You can still go buy a G Series today. They bring big bucks because of what they are. Now, going forward, they weren't supposed to come in anymore as converted machine guns. What's funny is, though, in the 70s, Steyr imported some Belgian FNFALs. We had the auto sear cut, which would nominally make them machine guns too, and yet again an exemption was made because it was an honest mistake. And see, that seems to be how the law is. If someone feels like they're making an effort to obey the law, and as long as there's no malicious intent or willful disobedience, it's usually thrown out of court and upheld. And that's what we've seen time and time again with all kinds of other guns. And the whole machine gun thing, which is what this pertains to, again, was passed by Congress, part of a major act, and people take machine guns a hell of a lot more seriously than they do SBRs and SBSs or arm braces or any of that stuff. Much higher standard is there. And so I just don't see, I think worst case we might see a situation where there's a pre-ban, post-ban arm brace, where the ones that are already out there are illegal. But I don't see them banning them outright. I think they thought they could get away with it because they did with the bump stock, although as it looks now, they may not have. That seems like that might get overturned anyway. And far fewer of those were sold than arm braces. I just don't think they realized how massively popular and well-owned it is. And their 293-page thing is just gobbledygook. As I've said before, they wrote it horribly. Try reading it. What you're reading is not legalese. If you present that to a lawyer, they'll say, "What the hell is this?" just as much as you would or I would. It does not make sense. It is not clear. They tried to cast too wide of a net, and they're not going to catch any fish with this. So in conclusion, what do I think? What should we do? Where does this leave us now as we move into the new year? As I said at the beginning, don't panic, don't worry. The ATF's not knocking down your door. They're not taking you to jail. Now, do we have a problem? Yes, we do. But this storm has been on the horizon for a long time. It's been coming, guys. It will get fought in court. In fact, I would imagine that SB Tactical, SIG, other companies that have major stake investments in this are already pursuing it. Q, because they were basically the first victim. They were patient zero and all this, have already been pursuing it. And what's funny is, to me, a lot of these are government contractors. Of course, SIG is a major one. B&T, which I've shown in my other thing with my SCW, they're a government contractor. FN's on the list. Springfield, Smith & Wesson, Ruger. These are all major government entities, or at least a major American corporations. Imports are much more vulnerable because those are overseas, but all these companies, they have lobbyists, and they have lots of money sunk into arm braces and guns that are designed to come from the factory with an arm brace that could not readily be removed. They're going to fight it. As I said too, another funny thing would be kind of punk the ATF and just literally overwhelm them with SBR applications. Kind of think of that scene from Harry Potter with all the letters from Hogwarts. Do that to them every day. That would be just hilarious. Plus SBRs. Now, I know a lot of people wouldn't want to register, get on a registry for their guns. I get that. My position as an FFL is a little different. My guns are already in my name to me, so it really wouldn't change much of anything. Except if I wanted to go across the state line, I'd have to file a form, which, to be fair, is pretty perfunctory, but still. But I rarely, if ever, shoot out of state. So there's a lot of guns like that Bryn 2 that I definitely want to SBR, and the Mini Burial, because it needs a foregrip, and all kinds of other things. And I was all ready to do it last year, but then there was all this scuttlebutt about, hey, wait, you might be able to do it and save your $200. So I've just held off, if I'm being honest. And from that perspective, I'm glad I did. Don't worry, too. I know there's 120 days, 4 months, that's supposed to be once this goes into effect. As long as you get your paperwork in before those 120 days are up, nothing will happen. It's kind of in limbo. You've done your job. It's not your fault if they're overwhelmed. They're going to take 80 years to approve it. That might honestly be kind of where this ends up dying, is they just don't ever have time to approve all this crap. I don't know. At the end of the day, worrying, stressing out doesn't help. Yelling doesn't help. Just calm, rational, not disobedience, but just sticking to your guns, metaphorically and literally. You did nothing wrong. I did nothing wrong. We are not criminals. And we have to just stick with that. And we have to stick together. We need to stop listening to politicians that claim to be 2A. And instead of just believing them because we want them to be 2A, we need to make them prove it. Prove it by at least sponsoring bills that are pro and voting on them. We need to get people to put their money where their mouth is in politics. Too often now we believe what people say, and we tend to forget what they do or don't do within a couple of weeks. I mean, the news cycle now is so rapid that stuff is forgotten. We can't allow that to happen. And we can't just keep believing that Republicans are on our side, because they're just saying it. It's just perfunctory. No, am I talking about all of them? No. There are true pro-2A Republicans. And if there aren't enough of them, we need to get more of them in. That's just what it is. We need to actually make people do that. Now, that's a tall order, but hey, welcome to the burden of a democracy in voting. That's where we're at. I mean, would you rather have an autocracy, a dictatorship? I mean, what would you rather have? This is the best we can do. And that's what happens when you have a nation of hundreds of millions of people. And not all of them are going to be pro-gun. And I do understand for people who live in cities, LA, New York, I have enough self-awareness. I can imagine their point of view and about guns. Most of them just aren't educated, and their only experience with guns is either in the hands of police, which isn't always positive, or in the hands of criminals. You don't have target shooters, casual shooters, hobbyists living in the middle of Manhattan or LA. But what I've experienced with a lot of those people, they have preconceived notions, many of them false. Once you actually get them here in a more rural area where they can shoot, a lot of times their attitude changes. Or even then, even if they don't like guns, their attitude is, well, hey, that's a lot safer than we thought. Because a lot of them just think you can just walk into a Walmart and buy a Select Fire M16. Once they realize that what they've been told about paperwork and background check, which is really funny too. If you look at a lot of the stuff a lot of Democrats were wanting to pass last year after the tragic shootings, half of the things they wanted were literally already laws. Kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about not knowing what the hell you're talking about or researching your subject matter. And that's where they're at now with bump stocks and arm braces, mixing them up in their head. They think they're the same thing. In fact, I think a couple have even said an arm brace is a bump stock. Again, we need to have politicians more accountable on both sides. We need to actually get them to do their job. They need to get off the Capitol steps, out of the street talking to reporters, in their office, writing stuff, reviewing stuff. And I'm talking Democrats and Republicans both. I get real leery of politicians that are every day in the news, because I'm wondering, why aren't you in your office working? I understand for big events it's good to be out there, but one thing I've always, our local Senator Bozeman, John Bozeman, who I have met and who I've had personal interactions with and who has helped me on a major thing eons ago, he's not out there making lots of stuff. He's in his office working, either here in Arkansas or in D.C. We need more people like that on both sides. Because once they're working, they can actually work together, understand each other better, and hopefully pass laws that maybe represent some interest of American citizens, because this arms race thing doesn't protect anyone from gun violence at all. But it does infringe upon the rights and expectations of gun owners. The reason it's being pushed through is because it's that do something mentality. It's a feather in someone's cap. It's all it is. It's political brownie points. It's a resume check mark. It has really been the pet project of a very few people in the ATF. Directed by DOJ, under the executive, starting off under Trump and very much continuing on under Biden. But we knew this would happen under Biden. That was a clear thing. Again, Obama kind of surprised me the way things went under him with guns. But, the Biden situation, the only thing that really surprises me is he hasn't really signed the direct executive order yet. But it's neither here nor there. But Republicans had a chance in 2017, 2018 to either repeal some bad gun laws or make some new good ones, and they didn't. And we see this time and time again. I know where I stand with the Democrats on guns, but do we really know where we stand with the Republicans? At least the current crop we've got. I mean, what's Kevin McCarthy ever done for guns, for example? We have to really look at the reality. And the reality is, so far, when it comes to our gun rights, our courts have been our best defenders and our best hope. And that's where I lie with all this. If the bump stock thing does get overturned, then this is dead on arrival as far as the arm brace thing. That's just fact. If it somehow goes through, the truth is we have bigger worries, bigger concerns, not just with firearms, but with everything in American life. Because it sets a precedent that will truly roll out of control, no matter who's in government. And it honestly gives more and more authority to bureaucracy. So it doesn't matter who's president, Republican or Democrat, if the bureaucracy has that much rule. But at the same time, while some in ATF may be power hungry, most aren't. Most, especially your field agents, are just workaday people. They're overworked, underpaid. They don't want this bullshit. How do I know that? Because I've talked to ATF agents that tell me that. They want to be busting FFLs that are selling guns illegally without any paperwork out the back door. They want to be busting people that are either criminals or wannabe criminals that want to hurt civilians. Most of them that at least got into the game did for that reason. Not all. And you can definitely see a very politicized ATF back in the 90s. It goes back and forth. And we saw the ATF's power growing throughout the 70s, 80s, 90s, and then it kind of got squashed down for a while. And now it's growing again, and it needs to be squashed down again. And that's what we need to do, either by courts or Congress or the presidency, the next presidency. Someone needs to do that. But this is our situation. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know which path we'll take. One thing I do know for sure, it's going to be interesting, and I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little bit excited to see the outcome. Then again, I'm kind of weird like that. I do, in some ways, enjoy living in interesting times. It doesn't mean I like it, but I find it very interesting. I find it very mentally engaging. This whole thing doesn't worry me so much. It does leave me uncertain of what to do in the future, where to go. But, I mean, best case scenario, this could see the overturning of SBRs altogether, or the NFA altogether. I mean, this strikes at certain fundamental things and the capriciousness of government agencies, and you never know. This could be the darkest before the dawn. We could see some very good things because it only takes a court ruling, and if it made it to the Supreme Court, I have very good faith that the Supreme Court would come down on our side, that this could lead to some very interesting consequences in the future. But who knows? That's too far away, too many steps away to really speculate. I'm just saying, best case scenario, this could be the pebble that starts the avalanche that topples a bunch of stuff. But I will warn you not to get too optimistic there, because again, going back to 2016, and everyone was so excited about the Hearing Safe Act, and so many people were so certain suppressors were about to come off the NFA, and then crickets. Absolutely nothing. So it could go either way. I mean, we're in 2023. Next year is an election year. Who knows who's running, who's doing much. It's really too early to tell on that front. What I will say is I hope whoever runs is sincere in their beliefs. I hope we get actual pro-2A Republicans in, and I hope that Democrats will continue to... not continue, I guess that's the wrong word. I hope Democrats will actually learn what they're talking about and focus on things that actually can matter and change. Because anyone who knows me knows that I'm not a one side or the other person. There's ideas on both sides that I actually do like, and I'm not a diehard person, 100% person, which does get me into trouble. But there's certain things that one side likes and other things that I do, and sometimes on certain issues I do stand on the other side. To be completely frank with you, when it comes to a lot of gay rights, especially gay marriage, I'm very much on that side. I think everyone has the right to be married, at least on a civil thing, And when it comes to a lot of drug stuff, I see a big comparison between drug freedom and firearms freedom, in the sense that we're talking about marijuana, things like that. Now, when you're talking about methamphetamine and synthetic things, that's a whole other thing. But, yeah, I have no problem letting marijuana be legal. And that definitely falls, that's even becoming a bit of a Republican thing, because we've had generations growing up with smoking weed. Kind of getting back to the turmoil of the 60s there. It's not that big of a deal. Not at all. On the other hand, I'm rather fiscally conservative. I don't like spending a whole lot. I like economizing. Obviously, I'm pro-gun. And, yeah, I'm certainly pretty constitutionally minded, traditional. Yeah, kind of come down both sides. I would say I'm small government, but let's be honest, there's no such thing as a small government politician anymore. That was a myth that died a long time ago, either side. And I don't know how effective that'd be now. Once something grows like this, it's hard to shrink it back. The whole drain the swamp thing didn't work, and I don't know that it ever really would. One thing I'm wondering is, so many of these people that are in government now in D.C. that have been there 30, 40, 50 years, good God, they're getting in their 80s. One day they've got to die or retire, or at least one of the two. Don't worry. We'll get through it. This too shall pass. I lived through the 94 assault weapons ban. That was annoying. Oh well. Those are some of my off-the-cuff thoughts. And this is just as of, I'm recording this on January 18. And so I'm sure we'll hear more as time goes by. And I can always do another black box, but just hang in there, guys. This is the joy of firearms ownership. If it's not this thing, it seems like it's always something. And the political winds will change, but no, I think the ATF has greatly overstepped and is about to stumble. And there we have it. Oh, one final thing. It's kind of funny. You'd think this might destroy pistol sales or arm brace sales. Much to the contrary. A lot of people have been wanting to buy arm braces and pistols this week. Not sure what the thinking behind that is, if they plan on SBRing them too, if they want to get them because they think there'll be a pre-ban, post-ban thing, or that this won't be gettable. I don't know, but it's kind of interesting, so I thought I would share that. But feel free to share your comments below. I know that there's points we'll disagree in, and hey, I respect your opinion. All I ask from you is you respect mine. Also keep in mind, this is just me going off the cuff. Things could change. New data could come to me. I don't know. Mood, day of the week. But what I can say is, for categorically sure, me and my friends and family have had a buttload of fun with arm braces over the years, and it's opened up a whole new category of guns that everyone is using safely. And one way or the other, we will continue to do that. If we have to go to court and fight for it, that's what we'll do. I'm not a very loud person about this stuff. I don't make outrage videos. I'm also a person that just kind of quietly stands their ground. If I wasn't that way, I would have not got all that far in life with a disability or otherwise. You learn really quick when you're born with a major disability to not let people or life push you around, to kind of make a line. Be flexible. I can be flexible some, but also when not to be flexible, when to quietly stand up for your rights. And I guess that's where we're at now. We have to just quietly but assuredly stand up for our rights. We know that we're not criminals, and we will refuse to be made into criminals. Me, you, grandmas with arm braces, other disabled people, veterans, many of them, who serve their country, police officers. I know lots of police officers that own arm braces. What are you going to ask them to do? Arrest people for owning something they own? That's kind of what happened with that M855 ban they tried to do a few years ago. Nah, we'll get through this. We just have to stay united and focused. And we have to hold politicians' feet to the fire. And as much as I know a lot of people that want to say the world's coming down hate it, we have to have some faith in the court system, and we'll get through it. This time next year, who knows where we'll be at. But that's my personal private take. I'm getting cold outside now, so I'm going to go in. This is Misha. Catch you very soon next time.